Welcome, Griffin. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss the Friday Afternoon Club family memoir. It was so good. Oh my gosh. I ate it all up. Every word. So good.
I'm
Congrats.
so glad. I'm so glad. I like your dog in the background there.
I know I was just looking, I was like, oh my gosh, I should probably wake her up. But
There's mine right there,
oh, so cute. It's
also asleep.
yeah, usually she's on the couch, but you never know. Um, okay. Tell listeners about the book. When did you decide to write this? I know you started off always knowing it would be a family memoir, but
Yeah.
when did you decide now's the time to write this book? And how did you get going?
Well, I have a very intrepid agent. I wasn't really a client of his, but we're friends, and he'd been after me to write a book for at least 10 years, because he'd heard my stories that I regaled about my own mishaps in New York and growing up in LA and also about my family, who had a pretty scandalous and fascinating past going back generations. So along the way, without telling David Kuhn, the agent, I've been sort of logging stories and letting them sort of build until I felt sort of fecund and about almost really less than 2 years. I wrote David and sent him about 40, 50 pages. And he went, "Oh, you sneaky, sneaky." So this is great. I know how to sell this. And he drew up a beautiful proposal, uh, and many publishers were interested. And as soon as we worked everything out with Penguin, where I've been reading Penguin books. They have so much meaning and history to me. That was a place I definitely wanted to be at. I went right to work, and uh, I have to say it just flowed. I was just sort of obsessed. I came in well under my deadline. Um, I found, when I was acting in a movie, when the camera would turn around and there'd be a setup, I'd rush back to my uh, dressing room and just pick up from where I left off. And it just sort of went like that for a year and a half.
Now you're making all other authors feel terrible.
I know it's not always going to be like that. Like, as a filmmaker, people's, and it's true, I think sometimes with books, um, it just, my first movie just came so easily. And the sophomore effort, because you just know there's so much expectation, and you're comparing yourself, and what to be afraid of.
Right.
That the second work is usually more challenging. Not
Well,
much that now.
that okay. I feel mildly better myself. I don't know. Um, one of the things that you do in the book is you make yourself into a character, right? You show us how funny you can be, and all these times where you're the dark humor and wit and all of that, and all the situations into which you fall that make you feel like you're in a movie to begin with. Can I just read this passage towards the end?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
This is when you've gone to con and the dry cleaner still has your tuxedo, and so you have to get the tuxedo from your security guard, which is so funny. You said, "I paced my room in just a bow tie and a shirt, taking no delight in the irony that Paul Hackett's misadventures continued to follow me even after I'd made the movie. These 'you're never going to believe what just happened' moments have taunted me all my life. It's why Amy thought of me for the role, and Marty couldn't imagine anyone else after picking up on my chaotic vibes." Marty being Martin Scorsese, just for those who aren't familiar on a first name basis, but that's okay. When it can be tiresome, but it can be tiresome to constantly be in stressful situations that an unseen audience finds hilarious. If, when putting my room service tray in the hallway in only my underwear, The door locks behind me. I swear I can hear a laugh track. The $20 that blew out the window of the taxi at the beginning of the movie is something that actually happened to me in the back of a Chicago cab. I had hoped making After Hours might exercise these laugh track moments of my life, but to date, no such luck.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
they continue. Is that really the
I'm
thing?
afraid they do. I'm afraid they do. Just, remarkable. I have a very um hostile relationship with keys to this day, constantly losing them and being locked and I do find, particularly when you're in a hurry, some very creative obstacles come my way that I do think, oh, this doesn't happen to anyone else. This is only happening to me. Sure, other people feel that, but it's certainly a way I continue to feel.
I literally just ordered these tiles, I guess, where you can put them on your phone and your glasses and like things. So you just stop. I just stop losing things all the time because you waste so much time
Oh,
trying to find all
great.
these things. Yeah. I'll
I lost the tiles.
That's funny. Oh my gosh. So your book is really divided into two sections, and the first is almost a career memoir. It's a career and family story of how you're, well, more family than career, but how like you're coming of age, so to speak, and how that goes with your whole family and the issues within the members of the family and your own relationships. And then the second part is much more of the trial, and I'm so sorry for the loss of Dominique. I'm so sorry. That's so horrific, and you wrote about it with beauty and grace um and all of that. But anyway, so when you were structuring the memoir and trying to figure out the two things to tell, did you feel this pull of how to divide it and how to tell that story and how to make sure that the trial story didn't sort of take over the rest of the book?
That was always a concern of mine, because it was I decided uh, to write it chronologically, which sounds like a logical thing to do, but I'd originally envisioned the book, even when I was uh, on my proposal, that it would be a family memoir with chapters with incidents that would take place. And I was inspired by David Sedaris's books about his family.
Hmm.
And my editor, John Burnham Schwartz, who's also a wonderful novelist as well, um, he suggested the boring tact of why don't you just write it in sequence? And I realized the story doesn't begin with, I was born in a
Hmm.
manger. The story began in the Mexican Revolution,
Yep.
with Pancho Villa driving my mother's side of the family um, across the border to Nogales, and um, the Great Famine, uh, Irish famine, on my father's side, and it brought me through um, my parents' childhood, and the difficulties that they had. My father had a very abusive father, um, and I just carried their lives along until I was born. And as I'm going along in sequence, I knew that that the murder and the trial was on my path, and I
Hmm.
would just, um, I was kind of like dreading that part.
Hmm.
Um, but it just, it arrived, that sequence of events, and after I'd worked my way through that, it was very I wanted to, the trial in particular, I wanted to get across one judicial travesty after another that happened to us in the courtroom, without commentary, without me having to express my feelings, because by then the people would know the narrator, the readers would know the narrator well enough to know how I feel, and that they would be as outraged as we were, and as confounded. And um, so when I got through that part, um, and then I continued with my career, um, I realized this is book two,
Mm.
and it totally. And so I went back and I just put book two, which was the beginning of the trial. And then I took a chapter that I'd written chronologically of the homicide detective Johnston, Harold Johnston, waking my mother up to tell her that Dominique, my sister, her daughter, was had been strangled, was on life support, and I made that the prologue.
Yep.
And then I knew what my ending was going to be, that I was going to open with death and end with life, with my daughter being born. So the structure came to me um, by writing chronologically.
Hmm. Wow, that's really interesting. Um, you wrote one of the most powerful scenes, I think, was when your brother Alex was institutionalized, or these two other people had brought him, and you were the one who had to sign him in to stay. And you were like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And you took him out. And you could tell you were just like racked with guilt. You didn't want to leave him, but he was having another manic episode. In fact, the whole way you wrote about Alex and mental illness was really nuanced and beautiful, and shows really clearly what it's like to live with somebody, or to love somebody who
Well, yeah.
struggles. Tell me about that moment, and just the takeaways from this whole thing. And I'm so happy that at the end you said he's doing very well, because I was
Yeah,
really
sure
rooting
is.
for him all along.
Yeah, no, he's doing great. And um, just backing up for a moment, when I wanted to write the book, I could not write it without my brother's blessing.
Hmm.
And in order to write about my family, and I would have to, talk about his mental struggles at that period in his life. And he said, uh, "You can write whatever you want about me, just have it come from a place of love." And it was a note that I took to heart with everyone who was in my immediate family, and beyond. And so Alex and I were very, very close, are very close. And having to see him locked up in this UCLA psychiatric ward uh, was just torture for me, to see him like that, in that condition, and him begging me to get him out of there. And I just I loved him too much. I didn't have the heart. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. It was uh and I said to the judge in this little courtroom, where you have someone mandatorily committed, I just broke down. I said, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I started crying. Uh, Alex was free. He was not free of his illness that would continue on for some years, but that was a very tough time for both of us.
Sorry. Did you ever read or see the recent series of I Know This Much Is True by Wally Lamb?
I sure did. I sure did. And Mark Ruffalo is a good friend of mine,
Oh,
and I I get so emotional. I've opened up some vein ever since writing this book, but I had called him, um, and he knew about my brother, and Mark has had a tragedy in his family with his brother, um, and we just talked and talked about that. It just really hit me deep. His performances um, as himself, as playing his brother, and as well as the central figure. They got it just right. They got it just right. I felt so, I related to that. Uh, I hadn't read the book, but the series really moved me.
yeah. It was so powerful. I always think about that. It was just amazing, especially in the context of yours. But so you have these very, you know, heartfelt, dark moments in your mother's, MS, and just there's so much stuff in here, and yet then we're like, you know, hanging out with all these celebrities. Like, there's just so much. You're in this full ride, which is, of course, your life. Carrie Fisher, by the way. So my husband Kyle started Morning Moon Productions with Billy and her husband Austin. So they,
My gosh. Oh
yeah,
my gosh, that's amazing.
yeah. So I
You know,
was like
I've
there
heard,
looking at the house that they're rebuilding and all this stuff.
oh yeah, well, I know that house really. And you know, I've written Billy. I've just encouraging her to read the book, and um, I don't know that she has yet. I think her dad might have. Um, um, you know, sometimes when the book was about to come out or something, there'd be little tiny gossipy things that would just focus on something that Carrie and I even talked about on camera in a documentary about her, about me taking her virginity, and they make it sound so salacious, like that's what the book was about. So I remember I contacted Billy and the father, going, read the book, read, love the book. It's gonna bring back your mom. And that section was so much fun to write. Um, and Charlie Wessler, who's in the book, and um, Carrie had a close knit of friends of myself, a guy named Gavin DeBecker and Bruce Wagner, the wonderful writer, and Beverly D'Angelo. And they'd read the book and they just were, that was the ultimate compliment. Like, you got her. It was like being in the room with her, which thrilled me.
Oh, that's
It
a,
felt like I was in the room with her when I was writing it.
it felt like we were too. Sounded like a very fun room to be in.
Yeah.
Although
Yeah.
perhaps not near that shower, but with the hand or whatever. You wrote something so nice about her too. Um, you said in the years, excuse me, you said in the years ahead, I was there for her family weddings and she for many of mine. She loved to pretend she couldn't remember which of my exes was which, but of course she knew and dug for every little nugget about when and where it all went wrong with the same curiosity she'd had about my proclivities when she was a virgin. I wish I could remember our last conversation before she left for London on the trip from which she never came home in 2016. It was probably about Christmas plans or our daughter's shenanigans, but I know, despite not remembering what exactly was said, that we laughed very, very hard. Oh,
Hmm.
so good.
It chokes me up just to hear it.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, this is, I'm sure will be a gift to Billy and the whole family. So it's really
Yeah.
fun. Um, you also, which has gotten, I know, a lot of media attention, this sort of expose, if you will, of your dad and things that we might not have known about him as a public figure in his own right, in addition to your aunt and uncle and all of that. How do you think your dad, having, let's pretend he just read this book, what do you think he would say to you?
I think about that a lot, and I'm pretty certain I'm right about this answer, that he would be really very, very proud. And both he and John and Joan um, did not hold back when um, writing about themselves and their own personal journeys. And Dad uh, had said once to me, we were having a conflict about something, and he would say, write it down, just let me have it. You're gonna feel great, just say whatever the hell you want about me, I don't care, just get it down. And that rang in my ear. And so I think he was very honest about himself. He did a documentary, there was a documentary about him, um, and he talked about a lot of the same things I did about uh, his sort of weaknesses as a social climber, and how important it was to give parties and to be at parties and be invited to parties by celebrities and famous people. He really worshipped at the altar of fame, and as children, and it kind of made my brother and I kind of uncomfortable. Dominique was much younger, um, and it was like kind of I talk about him, when I was young, of my best friends were, their fathers were movie stars and played tough guys. One guy was Jack Palance, who was the gunslinger in Shane, and the other was Howard Keel, who was a lumberjack. And my father was not particularly known for his masculinity and tough guy stuff. Um, that came later, the real tough guy.
Mhm. Yes.
But at that time, my friends, Gunnar and Cody would taunt me and go, our dad could lick your dad with one hand tied behind their back. And I said, uh, well, he wouldn't. He kick both your asses, and he will just as soon as he gets out of prison. And I made up this lie. What's he in for? I said he robbed a bank. And um, the rumor went around like smallpox. It was like the principal called my dad. And then my dad, when he came home from work, just went, "Is that something you want me to do, Griffin? Rob a bank?" I was so embarrassed. And he was embarrassed. It was like, he kind of knew, he knew I wasn't, you know, proud of him as I came to be. But at that time, I was, just a kid who had an idea of what a man was supposed to be. And at that time, I thought my father didn't fit the bill. Well, he certainly, and that was before I never knew he was a war hero.
Yeah.
And later in life, when he was very well known and received all these awards and was recognized on the street, he'd always tell you. And quite proudly, he really enjoyed his late life success. But he never told me about that. He never bragged. He never told me he saved two soldiers' lives in the Battle of Minsk toward the end of the war. And so, there was, as I say in the book, I wanted to be, I always had this idea of what it was to be a man, and didn't realize till much later I've been raised by one all along.
Mm, I love that. So what is success? What does the success of this book mean to you? Like what would you deem successful? What would happen?
Well,
What do you want to happen, I guess?
the first success was finishing it.
Yep.
Actually doing it. It was on my bucket list to someday write a book. I'm a big reader, and I've been, you know, taking in the styles of different writers, and um, seeing how, Philip Roth and writers that I admired, how they do it. I've been doing that even subconsciously for a long time. But I think that the success, um, and the praise, and I'm just love hearing how much I'm at an enjoyed where I can, at an age where I can just take in all the love and not be conflicted about it, as people are when they're younger and they're get success very early. Um, but it's different than coming out in a movie that I directed or was in or produced, because this is the only thing I've ever done all by myself. It's been a solo flight all the way along, and the landing has been triumphant. I feel like Lindbergh or something. Um, and so I have that. I have a real sense of accomplishment of having done something by myself, and starting and finishing it, and then having it and being proud of the end result.
Well, you should be. It's really good. And the way you tell stories is captivating, and the pacing is so good. And it's a nice, clean writing style where you're totally in it. And as a book itself, I think it is great. And obviously, you had all the stories to fill it. It's like a that's gonna sound terrible. I was like envisioning it like a Build-A-Bear. I'm obviously spending too much time with my children, but like the outside is great, but like it's the stuffing. Anyway, whatever. Never mind. Um, anyway, do you have advice for aspiring authors?
Um, well, I'm a novice writer myself, but I will give advice anyway. That uh, not to censor yourself. Just keep writing. Just get it down. Just plow forward. The fun part is editing. But just get it all out. I'd be I would turn in pages to my editor, John, 50, lumps of 50 or 60 pages. And, some was just, you go, come on, you don't want to say that. Or, just go, I don't know what the hell you're talking about here. And I go, okay, that's a good note. And then I would just go back and fine tune it. And I just didn't censor myself. One piece of great advice I learned from Joan, not that she told me, I read it, but I took it to heart, was always leaving something, the end of the day, leaving something incomplete that you look forward to picking up the next morning. That was great advice. And I would go to bed having to resist the urge to get out of bed in the middle of the night and keep on going, which
Wow.
sometimes I failed at that. But that was good advice that I got from her that I'll pass along.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for the book, for the time. I really appreciate it.
Use it.
I feel like you need to go start like a Substack or something because now I need to read. I want to keep following, like now I feel very invested. I'm like, okay, now what? Like, how's it going? Where are the
I,
stories?
I got more. I got more.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
Thank you, and thank you for including me with your summer read.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
And this was fun. Thank you.
Thank you.